All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Denver React Meetup. Tonight's a fairly special one. This is our 3rd anniversary tonight. So before we get started, we're going to run through a handful of reminders. One, you've mostly already noticed the pizza, but if you haven't, please come eat some. It's delicious. We've also got drinks up here. There's water fountain out in the hall if you don't want soda. Bathrooms are also right out here in the hallway and down. They're pretty much straight behind me. Big thanks to our sponsors tonight. We've got Ingenious in the house. Thanks for being our food and such sponsor for the evening. Give them a big round of applause. And I heard something, but it was kind of convoluted. So are you wireless registry as well? Or no? That's somebody else. That's somebody else. All right. Thank you for being a sponsor tonight as well. And as always, thanks to Turing for this great space to do the event in. And also thanks for Granicus, who sponsors our meetup fee. All right, real quick, who in the house is hiring? So we've got a little bit of a new way we're going to do this tonight, which is you're more than welcome to come write something on the board. You're also more than welcome to stand up and say, hey, I'm hiring for something, but you have to use a microphone because we have people online listening to a live stream who might be great for your job and can't hear you without a mic. So, anybody hiring? I was going to say, really? Nobody?
How's it going? My name is Chris. Oh, it's on?
I don't know.
It's on-ish? Hello? Yeah, all right, perfect. We're the first one up on the board there. My name's Chris. I'm from Formidable. We do a lot of work in the React space, but right now we're most interested in people especially senior level node engineers. So if you are a node engineer, you're interested in working at a consultancy that does a lot of React, Node, and other JavaScript related projects, just talk to me. My email address is up there. You can come hang out afterwards. I also have some cool Formidable stickers if you like those things, but you don't even have to apply for a job for them. So come hang out. Cheers.
Thank you. And, ooh, now it's loud. Anybody else hiring? Oh, hi, Steve.
Hi, my name is Steve. I'm the second one under Chris's. We're hiring, I work at SyncGrid. We're hiring mid to senior level React front-end engineers. It's like, if you think about 1, 2, 3, 4 principal, these are E3 level positions, which probably doesn't mean anything to you, which is totally fine. And this is for the customer growth / platform team, so our shared component library, all the fun stuff that I've convinced other people to do. So I need people to do those things. So you can shoot me an email, I can get you either job postings. So we have 2 of those roles. There's also a web developer role, which is more HTML and CSS, so we have open on our UI UX team that I can also hook you up with as well. So yeah, you should totally talk to me. That'd be great. I know. I had the sense that I was supposed to just keep talking and buy time as you finished writing. Yeah. What's everyone doing? What's up? So you ever take an Uber? Yeah, right? You ever get an email saying you took an Uber? We sent you that email. Apparently, our biggest customer is Niantic for Pokemon Go. I've never actually gotten an email from them, but apparently they can take down our entire systems with the amount of emails they send. So it's basically emails and API. So I guess the follow-up question is, what does a front-end engineer do, right? Or do you need me to stop talking now? I can totally do that too. All right, cool. Yeah, it's really hard to stop me. So on the front end side, basically we realized if we can charge developers fractions of a penny to use the API to send emails, then we can charge marketers full pennies if we built our own client-side applications on top of our own APIs. So that's what I do.
Thanks, Steve. So I don't think I introduced myself at the beginning, actually. I'm Kevin McKernan. I'm a lead web engineer at 303 Software. We are hiring for mid to senior React and Node developers, so kind of anywhere on that spectrum that you are, more leaning front end, more leaning back end. I like to think of us as a product agency, at least that's the work we're working on doing. So we're working on big web apps, backends for native apps, stuff like that. Put my email up here. Come and talk to me if you're interested. So, anybody else hiring? Hi, Will.
Hi, I'm Will. I work in Boulder. I used to work in Denver. I work in Boulder now. So I work in Boulder at Workday with Matt and Alicia, and we're hiring up at Workday. And if you want to hear more, talk to Matt, Alicia, or myself. We'd love to talk to you about it.
Thank you much. Anybody else?
I'm Kevin Jones. I work with Ingenious, but the real Ingenious guys are in Uruguay. And if some of you came to the meetup when it was kind of cold and yucky and not bicycle weather, it was nasty. But the guys were here. They really are excited. It's a relatively small boutique firm, 50 guys, 50 people, and they just love to get involved with the React community wherever they work. We're in 5 different countries, and they're just so stoked about Denver and the people here. So,
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah. All right. Last call for hiring. Cool. All right, so next up, announcements. Will, do I have any announcements? Is there a conference next month? I think Steve was going to talk about this. Come talk about it. I'll let the guy organizing it take this one off my hands.
All right, hello again. My name's still Steve. So I run a conference called Dynamodb.js, which is a JavaScript conference here in Denver. This will be the 3rd year, so it's a full day of talks, like your traditional conference setup, and then a full day of workshops, like long form, 1, 2, 3 hour workshops here. A bunch of really great speakers, including Chris. Yeah. So you should totally check that out. So like right now we have a little bit of a problem insofar that a thing that I never expected to have happen is that we sold out about 7 weeks beforehand. So this is not official, and so I can say this in words and apparently on a live stream, whatever. It's on the internet, it's fine. Which is like currently right now we're like basically waiting for the ink to dry on a new contract on a new venue so we can sell another 50 or 60 tickets. So if you're interested in attending and you missed out, I'm working very tirelessly to make sure that we have more tickets for you. So just either follow us on Twitter at dinosaur_JS, because some person who has never tweeted has dinosaur.js, or go to the website dinosaurjs.org and sign up for the email list, and we'll tell you when there's more tickets, and you can see some of the great speakers. We have more to announce coming up, and a bunch of other like really fun and exciting stuff, so you should definitely follow that. And please don't hassle me that our mailing list is powered by MailChimp, even though in fact I work at SendGrid.
Oh, the irony.
June 21 and 22.
Dinosaur.js is on June 21st and 22nd. Okay, I did that right. Hooray. Cool. Thank you, Steve. You missed that part. Yep. Wah, wah. Yeah, so, just for Will, this is our 3rd anniversary. We have cupcakes for intermission, so between the 2 talks, we'll give you something to do. Another announcement, we are always looking for help. We've got 4 or 5, a small number of co-organizers right now, and if you would like to help, whether that's running to the store before the meetup, helping let people in after 6, helping with the website, helping with the meetup page. Pretty much if you want to help, we can find something for you to do. So come up to me, come up to Will. Sam's upstairs holding the door. But yeah, come find one of us. All right, is Doug going first or is Steve going first? I think Doug, the slides say Doug is going first. So this is Doug Whitney. Doug, where do you work? Okay, Doug works at Wireless Registry. I knew there was somebody here. And so he's going to talk about exploring the Web Performance API and Google's Rail model. So let's hear it for Doug. And us as we quickly get him set up.
Hot mic. Cool. And a monitor cable?
Put it more up, like at the base of your neck.
Cool.
It's airplane. I'll help you get on it. Looks like we just click on that right there. And then Clark. And put in 5014.
Sorry, say that again?
Do you have a quick link you could send me to those slides real quick?
Yeah,
Not,
not
don't worry about it.
handy. I can send it right after though.
No sweat.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Doug Whitney, and as you heard, I work for a company called Wireless Registry. We're based out of Washington, D.C., but there are about 10 of us now here in Denver. We're not currently hiring, but we have been growing a lot recently, so I expect that we will be hiring again here shortly. So my talk is about some work that I've done recently here on the application that I primarily focus on, which is a mapping application with a data viz layer. And in building this component and getting it connected with the data source, the APIs that we use, there were immediately some performance issues, and this is kind of the story of working through those and kind of chipping away at them. So this is me. I like this image because it sums up like kind of where I started with this. And in this analogy, the little girl is me, the trampoline is my crappy code, and the cat is the browser just trying to make it stop. So when it comes to performance, I think the first question is like, what really is fast enough? I don't know, what kind of models were prevalent in the past, but one that is available now is from Google, and it's what they call the Rail model, and it deals with these kind of different phases of your web application lifecycle, from loading to user interaction and what happens in between. So you can see where the acronym comes from there. And the phase that I'm going to kind of focus on here is animation, and we'll get into that. But the Rail model lays out, timings for different types of actions and what users expect to happen within those kind of time buckets. So you can see, what you can accomplish in a given window. And the first is really small, right? That's 16 milliseconds, and that's where smooth animations come from, is where you can achieve 60 frames per second And you do that by being able to draw a frame every 16 milliseconds. But really, you get about 10 milliseconds because the browser still needs time to draw it. When you get into the next bucket, we're talking up to 100 milliseconds. And this is the window where users will perceive that if you're able to respond in this window, it feels immediate. Like what they're doing has an immediate effect on the system. Once we start to get beyond that, then this is where users, perceive noticeable delay in this bucket of 100 to 300 milliseconds. And again, this is still a really small amount of time that we're talking about. But as a user, it really is noticeable, and you'll hopefully see that in some of the screenshots that I have coming up here. And then, of course, in the last two buckets, right, we're talking about things like loading an entirely new page or a new view into the application, really transitioning from one part of the application to another, loading a brand new route. And in the final bucket, we get to the point where users are going to start to lose focus on the task that they were trying to accomplish. So again, this is kind of how the Rail model is broken down and what we should be shooting for according to the research that Google has apparently done. So just for some context about the performance issues that we ran into while building this component and hooking it up with our data APIs. Our application is built in React with JSX, and we compile ES6 down to ES5 for the browser. And we use DecGL for our data viz layer. We also have a mapping layer in there, and we use things like Lodash and Moment.js. But overall, our kind of UI stack is relatively shallow. We don't have a lot of dependencies, which overall serves us well, but doesn't solve any problems on its own. So this is the scenario where the user inputs some parameters, submits a form, which hits an API. We get back some data. It can be quite a bit of data. The responses can easily be over 100 megabytes. And then we take that data and visualize it on a map. And then the new work that we were tackling here that is the same space where we ran into the problems is in adding the ability to filter this data set down on the client side, right? So we've brought it all back from the server, and now we need to make it useful for the user. Because at this scale, right, which we're talking about sometimes hundreds of thousands of data points, being able to bring that data back is great, but if you can't kind of slice it over time, it is much less meaningful. So this is what we were working on. So that involved building a custom component, which is just a slider component, but is also in this case a time scrubber, right? So you can see the tooltips on the end, on the top, right and left represent where the handles are positioned, and the tooltips down below represent the entire range of the data that we've pulled back. And the code for that looks roughly like this. There's a bunch of pieces that are left out, but this is really the core of it. And here in the update range method, these values that are being passed in are, again, calculated based on where the handle position is currently adjusted, but that code is also left out just for brevity here. So the problem is, again, that we're representing a lot of data on screen on our visualization layer. The time scrubber is also designed so that the updates are happening on drag using the drag API, and that fires pretty quickly. Similar to a scroll event, it just fires constantly as the user is moving their mouse position. And just connecting the kind of basic time scrubber component with the ability to do any kind of filtering was just unusable out of the box. So this is, I think, about 1,800 data points, and you can see just adjusting the scrubber just kills the frame rate here, right? I mean, this is just not gonna work at all. So my first idea, right, is let's punt. Let's just not do anything until the user stops adjusting the scrubbers. And that looks more like this, where the method that gets passed in to update the data range is now debounced, right, with a wait of 250 milliseconds. And this is where I kind of ended this drag event, is that this timer, the timeout on the debounce really doesn't have much of an effect here, because the drag event, again, it just continually fires even when you're not moving, but until you actually release the mouse, right? So click the mouse to drag start, and it just keeps firing until you release the mouse again. But the great part is, right, this is incredibly fast. We're at 60 frames per second because we're not doing anything until the very end. But this was not a good solution for the responsiveness, for the user. Part of the problem was just that the size of data was, again, not an issue here. We're in this kind of window of 100 to 300 milliseconds based on the timeout, right, for the debounce. Again, this is best case because, again, scheduling the work to be done isn't the same as having it done. So best case is we fall into this bucket after the timeout, and we filter the data and update what's drawn to the screen. So the next attempt here was to, instead of debouncing, right, we're debouncing, the idea is the function is not called until the event in question stops, right, over a given period of time. If you keep sending me this event, I'm gonna ignore it until you stop for at least 250 milliseconds. Throttle, on the other hand, is saying that no matter how many times that you call this function, we're only going to respond to it once every so often, right? So the good thing here is that the UI is going to update more frequently in response to the drag event rather than waiting until the user stops dragging. The bad part, if you notice, is that the interval has actually increased, where before it was 1/4 of a second, now we're at 3/4 of a second. So this is what it looks like with the throttle in place. So as you can see, when we're dragging, the UI is updating much more quickly, but there's still a noticeable lag, and again, we're falling into this bucket of close to 1,000 milliseconds to really see anything happen, because the max that we're going to make updates is at 3/4 of a second, and then we still have to actually complete the work to do the filtering and draw to the screen. So better in terms of more responsive to the user, but still not ideal. So at this point, my first thought is to go back to this code where we're doing the throttling and make this number relative to the size of the data set. That wasn't a good idea. Right, because again, what we're really doing is just kind of ignoring the fact that the code that we're calling takes some time and could probably be improved. So the next task was really kind of investigating what we were doing in response to the drag event and understanding what's happening in that code path. So, in most cases, the first thing I turn to are the dev tools in Chrome or Firefox. It was really challenging in this case with trying to just record a performance profile. I'm not sure the exact reason for that, other than we're doing a lot of work in the drag event, again, which fires very frequently. And just recording a profile just would hang or crash. And when it did work, it was reporting frames per second that didn't seem right based on what I was seeing. And my theory was that DevTools itself was having a big impact on the speed that was being reported, which made it hard to dive into like a flame chart, for instance, and feel like that the times we were getting were accurate. So I needed some other way to kind of go about this. And this is where the performance API came in handy. It's actually a really simple tool, and you could do the same thing with a date object, where you're just setting some timings, running some code in between, and then diffing the two times that you've recorded. So without DevTools, to really give us good feedback on what we were seeing, this became really valuable. And our general strategy was to start, in the code path for handling the drag event, which also involved updating the date range, and start broadly by adding timings, at the beginning and end of this work, and then start to narrow down on the parts that were responsible for the majority of that time. And in reality, you can do the same thing with the flame graph in DevTools. It's based on the same idea. You start with a long-running block of code and start to narrow down on the parts that really take a long time. But that was kind of hindsight at this point, where we had identified what we were looking for. I'm not sure if we would have been able to make use of that, again, given just the lag that we were seeing in recording a profile. But some of the things that we found that were really affecting how long things were taking to update were just work that we were doing on this very large data set that didn't need to be done at that point in time. So for instance, as we look at these points on the map, each of these has details that are displayed in the tooltip. And one of the things that we were doing is formatting dates in advance for when the mouse eventually passed over that point. So it wasn't even for eventual use, it was for the off opportunity that one of those dots actually got the hover event and needed to display its date. So we just pushed that work downstream into the actual code that displays the tooltip rather than doing it all in advance. And that saved us some time there. The filtering itself was a big challenge. Not really a big challenge, but there was some code that I had written that was just much slower than I would have expected it to be. I've worked with Moment.js a lot in the past and have never run into these issues, but also haven't worked with data at this kind of scale. But what we found is that filtering this data set every time that the scrubber moves was incredibly slow when we were comparing dates using Moment.js, using its built-in functions. And one of my my coworkers, recognized that if we did the sorting by timestamp, it would be much faster, and it was much faster than I would have anticipated, 100 times, where doing the moment.js sorting would take 500 milliseconds. This was happening in 5 milliseconds, which really made it possible for us to take another approach at this, right? Where we're still doing the throttling, but now instead of updating every 750 milliseconds, we can do it every 250 milliseconds, excuse me. And so this is 165,000 data points, and the performance here is still very good, just in general. We're not hitting 60 frames per second all the time, but we're in a good range where this feels good, it updates quickly, there's not a lot of lag for the user. So this is a good spot. It could still be more responsive. Ideally, we can always hit 60 frames per second. There's always going to be constraints, and as we fix one thing, we're probably going to hit another problem behind it. But even here with 400,000 data points, this still performs, well. This is usable and really, again, adds that time dimension to what is otherwise static data. And again, this is compared to where we started with 1,800 points at one frame per second, so slight improvement there. So again, best case right now with the 250 millisecond throttle, we're going to fall into this bucket. We're not getting 60 frames per second, so somewhere in the filtering work or somewhere in that code path, there's still things we can optimize, but getting it to this point bought us enough time to get user feedback and kind of take those next steps. Right, I mean, this is not mind-blowing, but it was it was one of those things that snuck up on me, right? I mean, you're writing code, you're trying to just get to feature complete, and until you really throw some stress at it, you don't know where it's going to fail. And in this case, it was particularly with calls to moment.js and just whatever work it had to do to execute its functions. We didn't try to debug why that was taking so long. We just went with more native JavaScript to improve the performance there. Another question that always comes up is, when is too soon to be concerned about performance? And I firmly believe you shouldn't worry about it until you really have to, until there's something that is perceivably slow or really impacting the business. And that rail model is a great way to evaluate whether you need to dedicate some attention to a particular part of the application. And in my experience, performance improvements are often incremental. Sometimes you get lucky and you find something that has a huge improvement, but most of the time you're chipping away at stuff and kind of uncovering the next slow thing, and there's always room for improvement there. Ideally, this is where we end up after making more improvements, but we'll see how that goes. And I wish I had found this tool when I was actually doing this work, as opposed to putting this presentation together. The dev tools do give you the ability to look back at frame rate over time, but it's a recording, right? It's static, as opposed to this tool, which gives you real-time feedback about what you're doing in the UI that's causing slowness, which is just much more powerful in the sense of you have a tight feedback loop, as opposed to kind of inspecting an artifact after the work has already happened. And just on a side note, this is available as a bookmarklet, so you can just apply it to any page that doesn't have a content security policy and see how the frame rate performs there. And the source code for this also uses the performance API, which is kind of an interesting side note. So there's a couple of use cases for it, and this is definitely a good one. A few last tips when you're testing performance. You want to make sure you're in Incognito mode because your extensions can definitely have an effect on what you're seeing if they're manipulating the page. And you might also have extensions that are allowed in Incognito mode, so check those. And you know, I didn't get a chance to test this out, but DevTools also allow you to simulate CPU throttling so you can get a better idea of how things are running on different machines as well. And I'll include some links in the slides, and that's it.
All right, big thanks to Doug. Do you want to do questions?
If there are any, sure.
All right, I bet you can guess what I'm going to say next. If you want to ask a question, you have to use the mic. So one up front, start, nice.
Hey, kind of two questions. First is super easy. What does the data represent on your map?
In this case, it's IoT devices.
Okay, cool. And then the other question was, so I had a similar sort of performance issue when we were doing like a client-side search thing, and it turned out the search itself that we were doing was really, really fast, but updating the UI was slow. And I'm curious if you looked into, that map looks pretty complex from a DOM perspective. Did you look into whether just updating the map itself was slowing things down, or?
Yeah, we did, and you know, the map and the data viz layer are both WebGL, right? Which in theory should be very fast, but yeah, when we pulled the map layer out of it entirely, what we saw was that, you know, just filtering the data was where most of our time was spent.
Gotcha, makes sense.
Anybody else? Questions?
This is just a really simple question, but what did you do to take the map out? You just, like, how did you, just what did it look like to do all that without the map, without any GUI or UI?
So that's a good question. I don't recall exactly, you know, what that looked like in order to, you know, kind of pull that out of the equation. I think it literally was, I mean, it's really just the fact that the map itself is only responsible for things like pan and zoom and setting lat and long. All of the real work is in that data viz layer that's drawing the dots, again, because it's you know, in these cases, and we don't even really have bounds on the sets that we're returning, but you know, 500,000 data points easily, and just filtering on that and then passing it back to the data viz layer is where we saw the time being spent. Again, some of it was through the performance API by just figuring out where are we spending time in large chunks of code and then narrowing down into more granular pieces.
I've been doing a lot of performance stuff over the last few weeks with this rewrite we've been doing for the front end of our app. And as you were saying, you know, the work can basically never be done. It's a deep, deep rabbit hole. So for you personally, when do you decide when to stop? When is it good enough?
Yeah, great question. Again, I would just fall back to the Rail model, and if you're consistently within those bounds, you know, across different machines, I think you're good. Because yeah, I mean, you know, it's like analytics where you can spend as much time as you want, and are you really getting benefit out of it?
Maybe a couple milliseconds.
Yeah.
All right, so a React app, you are using the lifecycle of the React to update the UI. But in this case, you also have a data viz layer that is actually doing all the heavy lifting through GL and what have you. How is your React app interacting with the data viz layer? Was that on some lifecycle hook or something like that?
No, so the data viz layer is a project called DeckGL, and it's put out by Uber, just an open source project. You know, they need it for a number of cases, but the map itself is WebGL, designed for React, right, specific to React. So there's a Mapbox JavaScript project. This is the WebGL version of that, and then the data viz layer is built specifically to work on this WebGL map. So they're tightly coupled, and they are really fully integrated with React.
All right, so there's like a render method or something like that. You pass the data to,
Yeah.
and it just does its magic.
Right, so the data viz layer is just another component, and we render that with just a huge array of data.
I ask because I've been interacting with similar performance issues with updating a UI that is not directly updated because of the React lifecycle, and I found that it can be tricky to queue animations, what have you, according to the lifecycle, when the lifecycle maybe only happens so frequently, but you need something that's 60 FPS or something like that.
Well, you can always say something. That one kind of.
Turning on. It's turning on. Okay. All right, let's get settled down. I can't wait to hear from Steve. Gotta tell everyone that's having a great conversation to just hang on to that for later. Huh? yeah, communalize. That's interesting. All right, sweet. Grab your last drink, grab your last cupcake. We have plenty. Oh my God, I thought we'd chow through more, but there's plenty. It's better to have plenty than not. Cool, so as we get settled down on our 3-year anniversary, I wanted to bring somebody up here and tell a little, really quick story. So 3 years ago, I'd been using React for like a couple months because of one of the people in this room. And I thought, wow, there should be a meetup for this. But doing a meetup is so much work. Organizing a conference is so much work. I am not stupid enough to do that by myself. And then I saw this thing pop up in Meetup, and this person here, Chris Downard, had started this meetup on meetup.com, ReactJS Denver. And I was so thankful because I don't have to do anything. He's doing it. Within a couple months, he roped me into co-organizing, and I found the secret sauce of organizing is get friends, make friends, and get help. So like Kevin was saying earlier, you know, we definitely welcome you to the team if you're interested in helping in any small or large way. We're trying to make this meetup better than ever. I mean, Chris was saying as he came in, he's like, wow, this has grown. I remember we were in a 15-person, I think it was a 10-person conference room that fit 15 people. We squeezed 30 people in there one night. And it was very bad. It was very full, but now we're entering, which is fantastic. But we've grown so much, and it's because of every single one of you coming out here. Whether this is your first meetup, somebody says there was first. Somebody came up and said, "Is the first meetup? How can I help?" He actually said, "How can I help?" I was confused because I hadn't seen him before, and he's like, "It's my first meetup. I want to help," and I thought that was fantastic. So whether you help or not, it's fine. Being here and being a part of this conversation. Being in the situation I am where I have to tell this loud, raucous room of people having great conversations to please quiet down, we're going to continue the event, is a great challenge. So thank you to every single one of you for making this meetup amazing and what it is. Give it up. I also want to give a big shout out. I mean, Kevin's doing a great job emceeing his first event tonight. Josh couldn't be here. He's been a huge help. Sam has been our lead organizer for a while now. And I'm very thankful for everything Sam's done. He's been moving the meetup here, getting the live stream like going and improving. Kevin and Josh have been instrumental, but Sam's been the lead on this. It's been phenomenal seeing what he's done with this. So I'm excited to see what happens in the next 3 years if I'm like Chris, retired and off in somewhere else doing other things that is not so stressful or onerous. It's really not that bad, especially when we spread it out, especially when everyone here is so wonderful. So thank you all for coming. With that, I will hand it over to Steve. I'm really excited to hear his talk. Woo. All right.
What up? Yeah, I can do as high as we want. How's that?
I don't know.
We'll find out together. Hello. Hi. That was me mostly checking the mic. My name is Steve for the third time. Didn't expect to have to do that 2 other times beforehand, but here we are. As mentioned befor, I run a conference called Dynamodb. This is its website. I'm just going to show you a bunch of websites. It's going to be great. I work on a thing for SendGrid. We do a bunch of things. We have an ad platform, an automation platform, a WYSIWYG email platform, which is like cool to show people because like who doesn't like drag and drop? Wow, that's amazing. So I work on that. Teach some courses for front-end masters. If you want to, if you like the next 20 minutes, you would like to hear 30 hours of that. That's a thing that you can do. Yeah, I know. Scary, right? Cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about AWS Mobile and some of the kind of basically the title of this talk is Rapid Prototyping on AWS. So part of this comes from my job before I worked at SendGrid. Weirdly, I did not put this sticker on here. This predates me working at SendGrid. My previous job was I was on the founding team of the Turing School of Software and Design and the creator of the front-end engineering program here. And so with the front-end engineering program, we wanted to build applications, but there was a back-end engineering program, right? And so I didn't want to get into all the weeds of necessarily spinning up an entire back-end application. It was how do we just get some basic APIs up and going so we can focus on building React apps. So it was either I can maintain all the back-ends of these things, we can try to get a bunch of the Turing back-end students who are still trying to learn how to write back-end services to get everything done, right? And so in 2016 when we started the program, we opted for using Firebase, right? Has anyone heard of Firebase? All right, so half, so I'll give you the one-liner, which is Firebase is, Google bought Firebase a while back, and it's effectively a database and an auth layer, and it's basically a backend in a box, right? And it's really cool. One of the things is, though, there's been a bunch of services like this, there was another one called Parse. Has anyone heard of that one? Less, because Facebook bought it and killed it. And so there's always this risk when you use one of these platform in a boxes insofar that someone might take the box away, right? And that's problematic because then you don't have a backend anymore and none of this goes particularly well. So at SendGrid a few months ago, we decided we're going to go all in on AWS. So I was cool, I should learn me some AWS. And one of the things I was kind of looking for is, on top of building some of these larger front-end applications, we also have a need to prototype stuff real fast, get it in front of customers before we go through all the work to build stuff. Is this a thing? Would you give us money for this, right? Is definitely important before we spend a bunch of time building it. So it was okay, cool. I wonder if I could do a bunch of this other stuff in Amazon Web Services. Right? And what I found out is that the answer is effectively yes, which is good. And then more importantly, that for a lot of the tools that Amazon has for this stuff, there's an added benefit that is just a lightweight abstraction layer over the real deal Amazon Web Service stuff, right? And so rather than I hope Google doesn't shut down Firebase, and I love Firebase, you'll rip Firebase from my cold dead hands. But what a lot of the Amazon services do is they effectively just give you an abstraction over all the stuff that we're building the thing that sends 1.2 billion emails a day, the same things that we're using for that are the same things I can spin up really quickly in an application using these same services. So that's super cool and a little bit future-proof if I'm going to prototype. So there's a few kind of major things, and Amazon, for everything they're very good at, they're not super good at naming things and making stuff very clear what it is. See also that Amazon has a thing called CloudFront, which is a CDN service, CloudFormation, which is a infrastructure as code, and CloudTrail, which keeps track of who changed what. Those are 3 different products that all have effectively the same name. So we'll do a little kind of tour. AWS Mobile, and you might be like, I make desktop applications, like same thing, as far as anyone's concerned. Like, SendGrid doesn't like, my favorite thing to do, I don't know, has anyone like worked at like a consultancy? Right, the first thing your client does whenever you do anything is they grab it and they do this with it repeatedly. To see if it's responsive, and you can see that like we take responsive design very seriously at SendGrid. We're hiring, that's all I have to say. Cool, so like yeah, like we're focused on the desktop, but a lot of this stuff still applies if you're focusing on like building some desktop applications. So AWS Mobile is kind of like this kind of like UI dashboard for like, oh, I want to like change a bunch of stuff in my database layer or any of that kind of stuff. It basically gives you just like a web interface, like that's a wrapper around all these things. The other thing you're going to see me use today is this thing called AWS Amplify, right? Look, it's got a guitar. What that basically is, it's a JavaScript library for either React or React Native for basically working with AWS Mobile Hub, right? And there's also a library with a bunch of higher order components in React that you can just use out of the box. So it's basically a helper library, so you don't have to do a bunch of like gross work by yourself. And the last one, which I'm going to show briefly, is this thing called AWS App Sync, which is basically like you define a GraphQL schema, and it makes all the databases for you and wires it up offline in real time. So like, cool story, backend developers. I don't know what to tell you. So we're going to work this application today. It's online in a repo. There's 2 branches. So it's all going to be live coding today, which is like not at all intimidating in front of this many people. Because last time I was here, it was in a much smaller conference room. So worst case scenario, if live coding goes terrible, you know, in a cooking show where they have like a pre-done turkey in the oven that they just pull out, where there's a pre-done turkey if this goes really poorly. But then you can also look at it later as well. And so we're going to take this app. Does anyone have the situation where like someone has wronged you? Yeah, exactly, right? Like all the time. And like as you get older, right? Like I used to be blonde. It's getting increasingly gray, I promise. And like the list of people who have wronged me is like growing, right? It was like more than I could keep track of in my head. Right, so I did the obvious thing when you're a developer and you have a problem to solve, is you make an app to solve the problem. So I decided to make an app to keep track of all the people that have wronged me. So, you know, I could say like, Dad not showing up to my soccer games. I was terrible at soccer, I don't blame him. And then I can avenge them or not. Like I can keep track of the like grudges that I've avenged and the ones that I haven't. This remove feature I would plan on getting rid of in production because like I'm willing to like forgive people, but not forget. So there's no, I don't plan on having a delete feature in this database, but you know, you got test data, you want to make stuff work. The problem with this application right now is that it's like baby's first create React app, right thing. I just typed create React app, grudges, boom, I chose a random color, I showed off my skills as a UI designer. Yeah, I know. And we had an app. But like I refreshed the page and my grudge is gone. Like this defeats the purpose of this application, right? What I want to do is have one where I can persist these grudges. And I don't want to spin up a server, I want to deploy it, and all of those kind of things. So what I want to do is I want to create a backend for this, and obviously this needs to be authenticated, right? Like, you know, like nobody, you don't want anyone else finding your list of grudges, right? This is why you put on do not disturb mode every time you join a Zoom meeting, right? If the shit talking keeps like coming up in your notification center, you're gonna be in somebody else's grudge list. So what we're going to do together right now is we are going to build a backend with authentication and deploy it to a CDN distributed around the world. Right? You got time, right? It's not 79 degrees in here or anything. It'll be fine. Cool. So I'll just open up a new tab, or let's see. Let's open up in Visual Studio Code. That seems like a good choice. Very cool. Of all the like live coding fails, Visual Studio Code not opening is not really the one I banked on. It was like I forgot how to do a thing, not my text editor won't open. Don't make me use Vim. That's cute. All right, TextMate it is. I'm the last TextMate user, in case anyone wants to know. So we've got it fired up. All right, cool. So what we're going to do is there's a global package called AWS Mobile. So that seems legit. We'll type in AWS Mobile init. All right. Yeah, my code is in source. Yeah, I'm going to build it to build directory. I'm going to run npm run build. That seems legit. Start is npm start. Yeah. We can call it grudges 2018, 5, 15, 19, 26, 16. That's as good name as any. So we're creating a backend. Let's give it a second. See how this goes. Sweet. All right. Retrieving some stuff. You can see I have this new folder over here called AWS Mobile.js, and there's like a lot of scary stuff. Oh, it's my backend. It's just in a folder. I'm never going to look at that again. I mean, we can look at it. Who wants to look at it? You want to look at it? We can look at it. No. We can see that there's like a bunch of basically, oh, we're going to use Cognito, which is their authentication service. And here's like the name of your analytics for tracking everything. Here's the region you're in. You look at the back end, it's basically like what your actual backend services look like and everything it's going to spin up for you. It'll create you an S3 bucket and a CloudFront distribution and an IAM policy, which I'll never actually understand how those work. CloudFormation as well. We know that's different. Very cool. Closing that folder, never looking at it again. Cool. So the other thing is you see this AWS exports thing, which is, again, we saw this file before, and it's a bunch of stuff about my application's backend. So what we'll do real quick is we'll just, we'll go ahead and we'll grab that and we'll say import amplify, which is all those helpers, remember? You all remember. It's really great that all the code completion that is in Visual Studio Code is not in TextMate. That makes me feel great. And then we'll import that, remember that file, AWS exports? Let's pull that in as well. Exports from, the nice part is I don't have to worry about like ESLint yelling at me anymore. So that's cool. Also, that it takes the live coding peril up to a whole new level. Cool, and so we'll pull that in, and then we'll say like, hey, amplify, take that like JSON file and like do stuff with it. I used to live code for a living because I used to work here, and I still can't type in front of people, so that's a thing that we're all going to experience together. Cool, so let's save that and like go ahead and like make sure things didn't crash. There's nothing in the console. That seems good. All right, cool. So now we have Amplify installed. Should we like add authentication? You feeling authentication's next, right? Cool. Otherwise, how am I going to like do the other stuff? Cool. So let's go to the application and let's pull in. I told you that there was AWS Amplify, which is a bunch of JavaScript stuff, and then AWS Amplify React. There's also React Native, which is a bunch of higher order components. So let's say like we'll go ahead and we'll import with Authenticator. And this is not going to work out of the box, but we'll find out why in a second. From AWS Amplify, React. Cool. And then we'll just wrap the entire application in this Authenticator. Neat. All right, that's going to probably break or just fail weirdly. I do have a sign-up thing, but like I don't have sign-up in my backend yet, right? If you're like, this UI is disgusting. Who puts rounded corners right here? It's totally themable, and apparently you've never seen the AWS like console. This is a thing that they do. But this is totally themable. You can like put in some inline styles, whatever you kids are doing these days to style things, and it'll all just work. And you can actually, like, this is an entire sign-in flow. You can also, like, actually get each piece of this. There's actually just an auth library. You can, like, do all this yourself, like, but that's not something you do in front of, like, 50 of your friends. So we'll just keep that. And then I need to have this idea of, like, an authentication backend. No one has implemented that for me yet. So let's go ahead and type in AWS Mobile Features. Oh, there's a list. One of them is called user sign-in. I'm going to turn that one on. I'm done. All right. Just got to tell Amazon about that one. AWS Mobile, push. And now it's going to create that authentication service incognito, set all that up for me, wire it up. I have no idea what it's doing, to be really honest with you. And all that's going to happen real quick, he says, as we watch this spinning thing together. Oh. All right, we're getting our new backend AWS exports thing done. Cool. All right, so I need to sign up. Password, 1, 2, 3, exclamation point. No one look at this. It's my Google Voice number, I'll block you. Sign up, we got a 400, no big deal. Cool, let's try that one more time. I'm just gonna kill the server and restart it again because I don't think that matters, but like, voodoo. I feel like I pushed a new backend, like killing my server is the least I can do, right? The next question is, do I get cell phone service down here? Oh, come on. That's the part I'm trying to not highlight. All right, very cool. Two-factor auth. 616. You didn't expect live two-factor auth, did you? You didn't come here for that. Hello, password, 1, 2, 3, exclamation point. It's okay, I got two-factor auth. There's nothing you can do to stop me. One moment. Well, it's like, how long is this talk? I'm like, I don't know. Cool. All right, so we got auth. We'll see our UI. Boom, auth in place. Woo, yeah. A round of applause for other people doing work. Yeah, all right, now we need a database. Let's get that set up. We'll say AWS Mobile Database, enable, prompt. Like, I want to be asked questions about this, is what I'm saying. Cool, let's say it's restricted to only that user, right? Because like, who likes wiring up authorization? Like, who enjoys it? Like, all right. Good. We're going to create a user ID table. We'll call this table grudges. This is the part I'm most likely to mess up. Let's make a new column. Let's call it ID. And we'll say that's a string. Yeah, sure. I have UUIDs in there. I know it's a string. I'm not weighing this. Date added. That should be a number. We'll use date.now. We'll say person. Person's a strong word for the people who belong on this list. Deed will be another string. And then we'll say, we'll call it avenged. Cool. And that'll be a Boolean. Cool, so we're gonna wire up a, whatever. String. And we'll say date added will be our sort key. That way we'll see them in date order, which is not the way I wrote this code. So that'll be weird. Sweet. So we'll add an index to search all that. So we have a database. We have authorization and authentication. What don't we have so far? Other than proper air conditioning right now. API, right? Like, cool, you have a database. You have no way to access this database. Seems like we need to wire up an entire CRUD API, right? Yeah. AWS Mobile, Cloud API. You needed the word cloud. How do I know where this API goes if not the cloud? And the thing is, it doesn't use any of those three cloud ones I told you before. It uses like Lambda and API Gateway. Right, none of those have the word cloud in them. I'm not angry about this. Enable, prompt. Cool. Let's make a CRUD API for an existing Amazon Dynamodb DB table. That seems legit. Yeah, grudges, that's the one. Restricted to signed in users, that seems legit. Cool, so now I have an API, I've got a database, we're good to go. Let's just do like the bare minimum to prove to you that I'm not like a complete charlatan. Like just a partial charlatan. We'll import API from AWS Amplify. Cool, and then we'll say like, when it mounts, we'll go ahead and we'll get all of them, right? So we'll say like, which is, yeah, everyone's favorite like React pattern, right? Who's not judging me right now for doing this on a componented mount? who wants to watch me wire up Redux right now? So, you know. Each CRUD endpoint is its own service, so we just say like what service we want to talk to. So this is called grudges. So I have a cheat sheet. We'll talk to the /grudges endpoint. And I can pass in a header and body stuff for like a post as a third argument. I don't really have any of that I need right now. I could use async await. This will return a promise though, which will be my grudges. Cool. And we'll say, like, I don't have any in the database right now, so we'll like console log a nice good old-fashioned empty array. And we'll also say this dot set state grudges. Cool. And then if something goes wrong, just like yell at me in the console. All right. I feel like I gotta do. I'm gonna kill that again because that's like just voodoo, really. I don't really believe that I have to kill it. But we'll push up my new database because I didn't actually push any of that up. We're building a cloud API. We're zipping grudges. I don't know what that means. No, it's probably not important. While that's happening and I'm bored, I'm just going to wire up the ability to add a grudge as well. So like how you do this like depends on if you want to like make sure it goes and show, if you want to do optimistic updates. I'm not having that discussion right now. We're just going to say api.post and we'll say grudges crud and we'll post that to /grudges. Seems cool. The body will be the grudge, right? Cool. So we'll send that all over, and then when that comes back, we'll get the response, and we'll console log it. Cool. And then we'll say, like, if that works, we'll just take whatever we had in state and add it to the state. Whatever we had from the event listener, add it to the state. Cool. So we have that as well. Let's see, did my backend finish yet? No. I got to wait for my API to get built. So it's a good thing I wrote the other thing. Anyone want to talk about anything while we wait for this? Questions? I can do questions now. I'll repeat the question because I don't have the mic. Or unless you want to. Did you type that name grudges crud, or did that come out? That came out automatically. That was magical.
Wait to repeat the question, Steve.
The question was, did I make grudges crud? And then I immediately answered no, it was magical, and it just happened. Thank you for the reminder. Cool. So under the hood, like what is actually happening here? This is really what our workflow looks like, which is we've got a browser. Cool. We're going to serve this entire thing, and we're putting an S3 bucket, CloudFront in front of it. They're going to authenticate through Cognito. Right now, we're setting up the API gateway. Lambdas talk to the Dynamodb. This is all legit AWS stuff that like we use in production at SendGrid that I didn't have to do anything for, which raises some serious questions of what everyone else is doing all day.
So if you want to like pierce the black box, can you back out of it? Or?
Yeah, so like if I went into like the normal like list all your DynamoDB tables, this is right there with all of them. I can just use it. In fact, if you already have some of these in place, like I already have a DynamoDB or an API gateway, you can actually go into that AWS exports config and actually put in your own existing things as well. But like these are all like real deal resources that are made, like just like on par with if you had done it the normal way as well. I also didn't repeat the question. The question is, how do I pierce the black box? The fun is like Jeopardy. I'm going to give you the answer first, and then I'm going to remember that I didn't do the question. Cool. So let's fire this back up, back to our show. Sign back in and see if I made a boo-boo. Who are we mad at? Steve. Not repeating questions. Cool. I got some prop type things. That's fine. Who really pays attention to prop types? And here it is. We refresh the page, and it's loaded back up again, so we have a real deal database. What is the last thing we're missing for this app? Yeah! Woo! All right. Last thing we're missing is that localhost 3000 is am I allowed to curse?
I'm not going to stop.
Shitty URL. I was going to curse no matter what you said. Cool, so let's just do the final thing here, which is we'll do AWS Mobile, and we'll do publish. And so it's going to do the whole create React app build thing. And like make all my assets, and then it's going to push it up to Amazon S3. Amazon S3 is just a file storage thing, and then CloudFront is going to distribute this wonderful app all around the world. Because let's be really clear, that's where this app needs to be, right? People need this app, and we'll have like gotten it into their hands by the end of this. So here is the S3 URL, and there's also a CloudFront URL as well. And like, you can take this as a belief system that I actually did the thing, or if you don't believe me, you could watch me two-factor auth again. But does anyone, like, we all just believe that this thing is published? This is not the time where I would start lying to you. That would have happened much earlier. Cool. So that's it, like the ability to spin, and there's a lot of other things you can do, like just to kind of really show you briefly AWS Mobile Features. So you can see sign in, we did user files was just an S3 bucket for putting like images or movies and allowing users to upload stuff. And in the AWS Amplify React bundle, there's just a bunch of like components that just help with all of these things. The Cloud API we saw, if you weren't just talking to a database, if you wanted something that like came up with a random number, you wanted to write some JavaScript backend code, right? You could like write also like Cloud APIs for that as well. You can spin up as many different API endpoints as you need. We just wrapped one to a DynamoDB database. Which we saw earlier. Analytics is super cool, and this is built in. It uses Amazon Pinpoint, and you can actually, like, if the user does this thing where they abandon their cart, you can, like, send them a push notification on, like, React Native and stuff along those lines. You get all of that, like, out of the box for free. The hosting you just saw. And the other one that I'm going to show you very briefly is AWS App Sync, which is the kind of, like, GraphQL as a service. So I'm not going to go too far into that because it's, like, 1,000 degrees in here. But I will show you just really briefly. You can just say, I want to create an API. And I'm going to use the sample schema in this case, which is events and comments. And effectively, what you do, in very small text for people in the back, you write a GraphQL schema of what everything is. You're like, cool, seems legit. I have events, and there's comments, and like I can make events and subscribe to real-time pushes to changes in comments to events. Very cool. And I hit create. And then if the schemas are really useful for, you can actually pull down an example project that'll have the config file with everything you just made in there. But if you wait a second or two, I'll refresh this in a second. It's going to create and provision all the DynamoDB databases based on the GraphQL schema that you just made. So you define the schema you want as a front end. It just makes all the databases for you, and then you just use them. If he hits refresh one more time, will it work? I feel like the longer the loader spinner goes, the better this feels. Which is the opposite of the last talk. Yeah, I have another one pre-baked. So.
You missed the thing that said don't refresh while this is done.
Yeah, I don't read. Does anyone really read those? No. We were complaining that one of the UI designers was complaining that nobody reads those banners, and it was literally a banner in the his own UI thing. I was like, what does that one say? He's like, I don't know. To answer the previous question though, because I'll show you a pre-made one. If I go into all of my DynamoDB databases, you can see, if we go to tables, so you can see the version of grudges that I worked on this morning, or maybe that was the one from this morning because I called that one date created versus date added, so on and so forth. You can see all the users in there and stuff along those lines. And so these are real DynamoDB databases. So if you're like, I don't like any of this, I want to just use the real stuff, it's all real stuff. It's real S3 buckets, real Cognito instances, real DynamoDB databases. So you can actually use all this stuff for realsies if you want to take off the training wheels. But as you saw, we were able to do authentication, data persistence, and a whole bunch of other stuff really quickly. And I think that the ability to spin this stuff really quick allows you to kind of take that thing that you wanted to do. Because we all have that side project that we want to build. Yeah, I'm going to build an index of happy hours. And you're excited, and you do all the UI and sketch, and you're pumped. right? And you're like, oh, I need to implement authentication. And you're like, I will literally do anything else. Rather than write an app about happy hours, I'm just going to go to happy hour. And then you never do the thing. And now here, you can easily spin any of those stuff up. So that's it. Thank you so much.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? And I'm ready with the mic.
He knows that I'm not going to repeat them. He's learned.
Yes, I do.
Hey, Steve.
What up, Chris?
I'm going to ask the managerial question. I'm curious about the billing for this. Like, if I was to give my entire team access to this, do I suddenly have 35 brand new infrastructure costs, or how is this contained?
I mean, you probably do have 35 brand new infrastructure costs. It's just how much are they, right?
Yeah, I don't really care if they're small.
Yeah, so it all kind of depends. Like DynamoDB is definitely the cheapest of the databases, right? It's much cheaper if you want to do like Aurora, which is like the relational database. Like a DynamoDB database is a NoSQL database, right? If you turn on like multi-region replication and all that kind of stuff, it gets like crazy. But right now, the kind of beta front end that we're working on, which is not our full in production one, but it's definitely like a non-trivial front end app, which is not using Dynamo or any of the databases, is currently costing us 14 cents a month. So you might get 35 14-cent bills, right? There's a lot of stuff you can do if you're really worried about that. At SendGrid, like obviously, like we have a built-in automatic budget of $1,000 per team per month for their like non-production stuff, and we have this like you can do a lot of stuff with like CloudTrail and stuff like that. We have a thing called Krampus, which Krampus basically, already sold. Like, for those of you not familiar, Krampus is effectively evil Santa Claus, right? And so what Krampus does is, like, if things aren't tagged correctly or they go over their budget, Krampus comes in and kills your service. So that's how, like, we handle it. Just, like, unceremoniously just destroys it and tears it down, and then you get, or, like, we have somebody on staff named April who yells at people who go over their budget. That's how we've solved this, right? Which is probably not a really great answer. All right, so done, sold.
So,
hold on, sorry.
Sorry, I forgot. It was that round of questions without the mic.
I threw everyone off.
You can add me to the grudge list if you want to.
Sweet.
So
that's it. He can keep his own. We've deployed it. He can keep his own grudge list now.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So the one piece of magic that you didn't. It was sort of pre-baked here was
the one piece of magic.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, like I could go home and do all of this again, except for one part.
Yep.
Is what I'm saying. And that is installing the AWS mobile thing. And I'm sure there was a process to like hook up your AWS account and stuff like that.
Yep.
Like, what's that process
it's
like? Is it
npm install -g AWS mobile -CLI, and then I think it's like either configure or login.
And it like asks you questions.
And it asks you your secret key and your key like that, and you're
Dude,
done.
that sounds super hard. I'm not doing
Yeah, it's tough.
Cool.
I would add my own grudges, but I can't remember that giant
It's like a
URL.
weird CloudFront URL.
So I create my app through this, and I'm all set up, and then AWS jumps all their prices. So I want to jump over to Azure. Do they have an out for that?
I mean, you could like theoretically, I don't know what Azure has, but like Firebase, you can just pull in one of these other ones. Like if you're doing this right, you should probably, like you remember like in my component amount, I was like API.get, like maybe you abstract that, right, into its own file. Like stuff like that, yeah, you're probably like, you need to like program defensively on that, right? So yeah, that's a thing, but like, who knows? Like right now, prices have a tendency to go down, not up, so. Competition, the free market, what, yay. But.
So if I'm building a pet project, like where does Firebase fit in this picture? With
so
the rest
Firebase was bought by Google, and effectively, like, if you prefer Google Cloud, like, Firebase is your thing, right? Firebase gives you like real time and a bunch of stuff like that out of the box really like easily, right? And so if you want like automatic, like every time something changes in the database, it's automatically pushed. You can do that with App Sync, but like there's definitely a little bit more work. Firebase is going to give you like immediately out of the box, like real time everything, but it's not a like RESTful CRUD API either, right? And so like you're going to like buy into Firebase magic, and there's a lot of, I love Firebase, right? There's a lot of great things, but they have like Google Cloud Storage, which is the same thing as S3. right? So like the database is a little bit different. They have cloud functions, which are effectively Lambda functions, right? A lot of like Firebase these days, since Google bought them, it is like, I wouldn't say it's Google's answer to what I just showed because it came first, but it is effectively the peer. And there are definitely advantages to Firebase. In my experience, it's a little bit more like black box to the previous question, where you don't just see all the databases and it's not all that kind of stuff. Like, I think that like if I was making a toy project, I wanted to, like, I was making a chat app, getting that real time out of the box of Firebase, totally into it, right? If I think like, oh, and then eventually I want to make money off this happy hour website, and I want to have like real Dynamodb databases and all that stuff for realsies, and I would probably use some of this Amazon stuff now. And I've never used Azure, so I don't know.
You said that behind the CLI, everything that's getting created is like real stuff that you can go in.
Yep.
If you go in there and configure stuff away from the default that the CLI set up, does that break the interface with the CLI?
So I know that like if you fire up, hold on, he's not connected anymore. Does he reconnect automatically? We'll find out. All right, what's the number on the screen? Oh no, it works. Sweet. So if you go type in, so let's say you hate the, oh, don't turn that on. If you do Aws Mobile Console, you'll actually see that I showed you earlier, the AWS one. I know for a fact that if you start futzing around, oh, don't make me do factor all the people. I know for a fact that if you, like my friends are here, seriously? Oh, I got 9 seconds, hold on. Sweet. So for this app, you can see I can go in here and I can configure a bunch. I know if you go into this UI and configure a bunch of stuff and you do an AWS mobile pull, you'll get everything. If you go one layer deeper and start mucking around, I have no idea what happens. So, but you can, like, if you hate like command line tools, you can like go and like change a bunch of stuff. Like, yeah, I want to add an attribute to this database or whatever one, go away. And you can change stuff, and then you do AWS mobile pull, and it will pull down all those changes. If I went into the full DynamoDB one, I legit don't know what happens. Maybe it's all great, maybe it's not, I don't know.
Nobody else wants to heckle Steve?
I mean, yeah, but I was being polite.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks,
Sweet.
Steve.
Thank you.
All right, so back to me reading things off of PowerPoint slides. Yeah, so thanks to Steve for kind of quickly backfilling a speaker spot for us, because last week we were all talking on Slack and like, does anybody know anybody who can give a talk? So if you're interested, you know, we had 2 great talks tonight. Let's give them another round of applause real quick. So yeah, if you know somebody who wants to give a talk, if you are somebody who wants to give a talk, reach out to us. There's the website, which is reactdenver.org. Nailed it. No? Oh. Dang it, Will. Oh, okay. reactdenver.com or .co. I guess I'll have to go by reactdenver.org before you all get back to your computers tonight. Yeah, so we're looking for speakers for June, for July, for the foreseeable future. So, you know, you want to come talk, you want to come live code in front of people and do a pretty decent job. You know, we're open to that. So, and yeah, thanks again. I will actually add one more thing, which I told somebody earlier. We do have a channel on Denver Devs, which is, I think, meetup-react- anyways, it's something if you look for it's something on Denver Devs. If you look for React Meetup under channels, you'll find it. That's a great way to get a hold of us if you wonder what's going on at the next meetup or if you would like to help. So, cool. Thanks, everybody. Here's Will.
There's also a new Slack for React in Colorado. Steve put together, what is it called?
First of all, I want to say if you're not on Denver Devs or Tech Friends, those are great Slack channels. but we put together a React Colorado Slack channel. Go to reactcolorado.com, and that'll just be React specific, so your messages will last a lot longer than they will on Denver Devs.
Thank you.